Welcome back to my series on my book review or my book club on surviving borderline parents from this book called Surviving a Borderline Parent: How to Heal Your Childhood Wounds and Build Trust, Boundaries, and Self-Esteem. As someone who grew up with a parent or parents like this, I feel like this disorder, this difficulty, this idea of walking on eggshells is profoundly impactful to our lives. And so in this part of the end of chapter 1, it talks about how we learn to, as a result, really develop beliefs and pick up signals as a result of these parents that often become the interior map or world for how we see ourselves and everybody else in it. And so the thing you have to understand is that this becomes, as I've talked about, basically its own trauma armor, its own trauma personality, where you go out in the world and believe that this is how the world it operates. And so therefore you should expect kind of the same patterns that you had at home with other adults in your life. Even though you may say you don't want them, you might find yourselves repeating them. So I'm going to go through this kind of next section here and read it out to you because I think it's really helpful. It talks about the messages children may receive from parents with borderline. Number 1, I'm a victim. You hurt me and it's your responsibility to take care of me. So that's how you feel about your parent. So your parent is always the victim and it's your job. That's that compulsive caretaker, people pleaser that you learn to go out in the world and hyper focus on everyone else's needs because that is what you did at home. And there's often always something you need to do more of or you're doing wrong, things like that. Number 2, I have no control. I am not to be held accountable for what I say or do. I may not even accurately remember what transpired. I may not even accurately remember what transpired. That's the part I was talking about where there can be a dissociation or when a rage happens that oftentimes they don't remember. And so over and over and over again, if you learn in arguments that no matter what gets said or done, number 1, they often say what they feel and they feel better afterwards and they're good. Can't you just get over it? Also, your reality of what happened didn't happen. And it's not necessarily like I've talked about a gaslighting like we might see in narcissism. It might be, but oftentimes they don't remember what they've said or done. I'm not saying it's okay, or they've blocked it out. They don't want to be honest with themselves, whatever it is, but it's a crazy making about what just happened in reality for many of us. And that becomes kind of how the world goes. Like my mom couldn't own it, so why should anybody else, or my dad or my parent? Number 3, my needs come first. When I do something for you, it's possible I'm doing it to satisfy some need I have. For example, giving you a gift makes me feel like I'm being a good parent. It's less about you than about me. Number 4, no one understands me. No one could possibly understand how hard I have it, how difficult my life is, and what I'm going through. So if your parent always trumps you in their difficulties, it's like, okay, everyone has it worse. I can't have it that bad because my mom had it that bad or my dad or whatever. The next one is I'm entitled, or alternatively, I'm worthless. This is the parent talking. In which case it's your responsibility as a child to bolster my sense of self. I rely on you. You better not let me down. And this often plays out in enmeshment and parentification, right? Where it's like you learn to be their best friend, their therapist, to get overly exposed to their world because you have a direct effect on how they feel about themselves. That's why they can't handle, I think, when kids also start separating and pushing back, it feels like a direct threat. And also goes back to feeling that fear of abandonment. And then lastly, my perspective is right, the rest of the world is wrong, but nobody listens to me, right? So it's like that's the message. So what the book has here says stop and think, record your messages. Are there any other messages you heard from your parent? Record them in your journal and include what your parent said or did that conveyed the message. Then the next part says, stop and think. The lessons are clear. As you read through the following list, ask yourself if you learned any of the following lessons as a child and if they still affect you now. Don't judge yourself. I shouldn't have felt that way. That kind of thing. Just see if it resonates. So, number 1, I can't trust others. Even people close to me will violate my trust and betray me. Number 2, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So you just can't do anything right? Just like never good enough. Number 3, it's unsafe to express your true feelings because they will be mocked, denigrated, or ignored, or just invalidated. You can't trust yourself since your perceptions are usually corrected. So that's why you're like, I didn't say that. Why are you doing that? Yes, I know your intentions. Being accused of things. People manipulate. Gifts come with strings attached. So you learn, and this, as I said, there can be narcissistic traits around this too. But you learn that there's some kind of ulterior motive, even though it's because of their own trauma. At the end of the day, this is what you experience as a child. Life holds little physical affection, few hugs or pats on the head. You could have a parent who doesn't ever be physically emotional or affectionate. Parents could be overly affectionate and violate boundaries in all kinds of ways. You were undeserving of love and affection, compliments, or material items. You were guilty of being a burden for the sacrifices your parent made for you, for being angry, for disagreeing, for having your own needs, for being a child, for being your own person. And then lastly, it's risky to assert yourself. Others' needs, desires, and opinions matter more than yours and always come first. So these are generalizations, of course, but the bottom line is, I keep saying, if you understand this eggshell nature and the impact, and you have the experience of what I call good love and bad love, and you've lived in hope, right? The hope of being a child with a parent like this, where you just so much want to keep getting the good love, and you live in that space that maybe this time the bad love won't have to come. It's really complicated. And then, as I've said, as they grow older and grow up, the borderline can play out differently, regardless of what it is. Borderline, narcissism, eggshells, immaturity. If you have, I keep saying, a resonance with this idea that you never knew what to expect, and that love is confusing, that people can't be trusted, there's a very good chance you've had this experience. And it does inform where we want to do the work. So just as an example of that, it shows you how these repeated experiences create these narratives and beliefs inside. And so if I go through the world believing that deep down inside, nobody will really take care of me. Deep down inside, people will eventually betray me or won't be trustworthy. Deep down inside, I'm a burden. All of that is going to, for example, have a big impact on how I show up in my other relationships, in my friendships and my romantic relationships, and even in my mothering or parenting. If you're not careful, you can have a lot of this internalized belief system around mothering, that when you become a mother yourself, if you're not aware, or you're maybe having some traits of BPD yourself, that you start to realize, oh my gosh, maybe even though I'm trying not to be that parent, I so badly want to be a different version of her that I'm actually doing it in another way. And I just need to modify a few things here or there. Like, I'm aware of it, but I didn't realize this other part, So the intensity of the relationships with these parents is really off the chart. It really is. There's usually an intensity that is different from, let's say, a classically narcissistic parent. So the intensity is often that there's some good connection in there that you're trying to always hold on to. And that makes the hurtful bad love so much more hurtful, because you've internalized what also feels like good love. So that's it for today. We'll go into chapter 2 tomorrow in Surviving a Borderline Parent. We're doing a little book club review here, but really because I want to share as much as I can about helping you understand these experiences and then provide some insight on all the different ways to explore healing. As a quick aside, when I made my course on healing and dealing with borderline and narcissistic parents, I used this book. I used this book on narcissism. I used the book on walking on eggshells. I used books on mother hunger and the mother wound, and on the hurtful dynamics of mother love. I use books on attachment. It's like every resource I have is part of that. And that's why the course is kind of extensive and a lot of videos and a lot of chapters, because I really wanted to presume that you didn't understand the complete impact from the exact moment you arrived in that childhood to wherever you are today, and then what to do about it. So check those out. There's lots of great resources and books. On my website on drkimsage.com, I have a book list just to look at that too. And then, watch movies. Actually, movies can be helpful too. Read books, listen to podcasts, whatever it takes. Do courses, do therapy if you can. Like, all that stuff. It's been years and years and years. But honestly, really quickly, I was just going to share this. I was watching Yellow Jackets, which I swore I wasn't going to watch because I knew it was kind of horror, but I heard it was really good. And I told my therapist this because I had therapy today. I said, I was the weirdest thing. I was sitting there watching this show, and some things have happened in this last week, so they're probably connected. But in this moment, I've always had this thing where, like, I know up here my mom had this disorder, and I know I'm not bad, but deep inside, my wound has been that there's something wrong with me and I'm unlovable and I'm bad and it's always my fault because that's what she's said. And I had this moment sitting on the sofa last night watching Yellow Jackets, and I just was like, wow, it's really sad for you that that's the childhood with the mother that you've had and the father that you've had. I can really talk saying it. I felt a deep and profound compassion for how sad it is. And of course, there are people that have it worse. But I don't want to discount my own story in that having, as my therapist said, you have been raising yourself from the time you came out of the womb. And that is absolutely true. I've never had anyone safely take care of me, ever. Ever. And so that's why I'm making these videos. Because I know where you're at. I spent 5 years in no contact doing a ton of work. And we have discussed it. You know, you tell your therapist like, oh my God, I'm sorry, we're still talking about this, but we have discussed it so many times. But last night, I mean, and I know I feel it, but like I really had this like, I was like separate from myself. And I just had this deep and profound compassion for myself that I really got it. Like, God, that sucks for you. It's so sad because my kids don't have to have that experience. They have their own stories and traumas, and I'm not a perfect mom, but me not being a safe mom is not something that they've ever had to experience. And I am so deeply grateful for that. I'm glad they don't understand that. But it's sad for me that I didn't have it either, you know? And it's sad for you. And I want you to know that this kind of work can lead you there. And I feel this profound shift inside. Like I finally get it. Like I finally get it after all these videos and all the therapy and all this stuff. I know all that up here and I feel it, but I felt it in like into my toes, if that makes sense. And I just had love for myself in that moment and just profound like reparenting, like, oh honey, God, I'm so sorry for you. And that's what I wish for you. So thank you for being here. Please stay safe and well. And I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.